To start with that I love architecture. I really love it. I also love startups, and that's why it's so great to stand here on the stage with Parametricos, who actually joined me our last batch, Founder Institute batch in Berlin, to run through it as one of the most structured and diligent teams that we have ever had, I think. So congratulations to that, and thanks for the invite to be here. I'm going to tell you a little bit about a startup ecosystem, about startups, how that works, how you can support this kind of ecosystems. I'm going to start with a question to you. How many of you have ever thought about starting a startup? Let's start with starting a company. Oh, so like a third or so. Who of you thinks you wanted to start a startup, actually? You have an idea of what the difference is, roughly? Anyone? Between like a traditional company and a startup? Any other views here on startups? I mean, this is pretty much the definition. So there's usually a lot of tech involved.
Probably it uses different business model than traditional one, so it's like experimental new company, so it explores new ways.
Very good addition. So basically, usually there's a lot of tech involved. It doesn't have to be, but usually there is. Usually there is a lot of possibility involved. So it can grow big. It doesn't have to, but it can grow big. At the flip side, where there's a lot of possibility, there's also a lot of risk. So when you build, most traditional businesses have been built hundreds of times, very similar. You still have to find the right spot where to put your brick and mortar store, or which area you build your business, but you can copy quite a lot of what has been done before. With startups, that's most often not the case. I mean, there's some examples where people copy startups as well, but most often you're doing new process, you're doing an innovation in the tech, so in different areas, but you do quite a lot. You go into quite a lot of risk. So that's when it is a startup. What do you think makes it so hard to start a startup? So I want to see some more hands than the ones that are already in the startup industry. Pardon? Yeah, that's a very relevant point. Yeah.
It's uncharted territory.
Uncharted territory. Yeah.
Culture might be the case, like
Culture.
because of the country and the society, so some societies are at least do not encourage risk taking.
I mean that the culture where you live in doesn't really like it that people take risks. Yeah. Fear of failure. Very important one, very much in the beginning when you really think about starting it. Is fear of failure. Any others? Information. Yeah, information. Focus where to start. This is. Yeah. I'm going to give you some more. So basically, there is many ideas out in the world. So probably all of you, not only the ones that said did already build a business, all of you had ideas sometime in your life, which you thought, maybe we should do something about it. We should build a company out of that, solve this problem for the world. But as you've seen, most have not started doing something about it. And all those things that we discussed just now hinder people to do things about it. So focus, fear, so maybe the support, maybe lack of information. Then later on, that's not very in the beginning, but that's a very important part later on, financing. So as soon as you're ready to really build it and to make it big, if it's a startup, the chances are quite high that you actually need external money. You might not have enough people in your network to give you feedback, because usually your friends and your family are not always the best feedback givers in the when you go for something like that. They might either be on the very positive side, say, "Oh yeah, sure, this is a great idea. I really want to have that product." That doesn't really give you really constructive criticism. Or they might be on the very negative side and like try to protect you and try to tell you, don't go for that risk. You're safe at that company. Don't try it. It's better if you're there. So the risk is high that you don't find the real support or real feedback directly in your network, in your family, friends network. Then, I mean, if you go on, you will need to find co-founders, so you need to find them in the network as well. Angels or VCs are sometimes quite unapproachable or not findable. So there's many things that makes it difficult to start a startup. Then on the flip side, what makes it easier to start a startup can be a great ecosystem. So it can be a system where there's many of those aspects covered. People who help, money that's available, transparency. So I'll just switch for the next slide. Legal support possibly, access to capital, government support. So in many countries and also especially in Europe overall, there's a lot of money which comes from EU funding, then local funding. There's many possibilities. But all those possibilities, you have to know how to access them. There has to be paths to find those possibilities, to find out how to reach to them, how to get them. And that's basically my next question and also my statement. I do work with the Founder Institute in Germany, so how can you improve an ecosystem? And one of those options is actually to just build a chapter of the Founder Institute in a city or in a country. Especially, I mean, I've talked with Monica before. The size of Cyprus is probably the size of a typical larger city. And for example, in Germany, we have 800,000 people in Frankfurt, which is similar to a city where it is great and easy to build a chapter of the Founder Institute. What does that mean? In the end, you help build the community, the startup community in a city or in this case in a country. You help foster leadership. You help make it possible that things happen. You help the entrepreneurs which are ready there. I mean, we've seen there is some who already raised their hands. In this size of an ecosystem, there will be more. You have to reach out. You have to build like a core situation where they can find information. They can basically find a heart of this ecosystem. In the end, so for somebody who does that, who actually starts such a chapter of a Founder Institute, and it has been tried before in Cyprus, I know, there has been a try before, but maybe a couple of years later is a good chance to restart and rethink whether it does that. You actually also automatically get a little piece of every startup that's been founded. So every company which actually is founded within the Founder Institute, all the people who run it get a little share. And all the people who support it also get a little share. So if there's mentors in that help in the batch, they get a little piece of the pie. All the directors get a little piece of the pie. Everybody who helps gets a little piece of the company which is created. So everybody should be interested to support it and to make it turn it into unicorn at some point. What is it? What is this Founder Institute thing? It's been founded like 10 years ago by a guy called Adeo Ressi, good friend of Elon Musk, and with the idea to bring basically a scalable startup model to the world, startup accelerator to the world, so that everybody can build this kind of a chapter in a city all around the world by reusing the structure and the processes that Founder Institute has created. And now, 10 years later, it's in 60 countries, more than 60 countries, more than 200 cities all over the world. What does it basically do? And where does it fit? So in the startup world, so for some of you is maybe not so familiar, there is different actors which help startups. So there can be actors which are very early, which are just you get your ideas from under the shower and you play around with it for a weekend or so. It's called, for example, Startup Weekend. Play around with it, you pitch it a couple of times, but then it stops. Then there is some accelerators. So we also call ourselves accelerator, pre-seed accelerator. There's some later stage accelerators where you already, to go into them, you have to have your company set up, your product has to be ready, in many cases also on the market, maybe already some revenue. And then later on, you would go into venture capital, so actually people that invest money into you. And we basically fill this gap between this ideation, so like a weekend playing around, pitching a couple of times, and then actually setting up a company, making sure you know what you're aiming at, what you really want to do, defining everything. That's where the Founder Institute comes in. What does a director has? What is the characteristics of a director? There's some examples here. I won't go through them. Basically, there should be 5 to 10 years of entrepreneurial experience. Would be good if it is in a startup world, but it's also helpful if you have relevant experience in whatever consulting jobs or existing known businesses. You should have a good network as a start, because you're going to need to tie into mentors. You're going to have to bring in a couple of mentors. So probably if you want to set up something new, having 20 to 40 mentors, something like that for a first start is probably something which is possible. So if you just get 3 people as the directors and find the network around you, I think it's pretty feasible. In the end, what they then get, and I'm going to switch to that, what directors have to do is kind of set up the whole thing. So they have to find a location where they do it. They have to find the mentors which run it, which help give the information to the people. They have to find sponsors if they want to have some money for it, because otherwise it's just this equity thingy. And then they have to find the actual startups which started. The benefit actually of an ecosystem like a, let's say, ecosystem which is not as grown as a Berlin ecosystem. Berlin ecosystem, startup ecosystem is crazy. So there's everything. There's I don't know, 20 or 30 accelerators at a later stage. There's those startup weekends. There's everything. There's tons of business angels, VCs, co-working spaces everywhere. I don't know how many hundred co-working spaces there's. It's really crazy. So the benefit of doing it in an ecosystem, which is also not as ripe, is that you can be this core. So a Founder Institute chapter can be really at the core, can really help answer all those questions which we discussed before. So it can really make a difference, a really big difference for the startup ecosystem. There is an example in Vietnam where obviously when they first came there, Founder Institute first came there, the ecosystem wasn't very ripe either. Now, a couple of years later, 25% of all the VC-funded startups have gone through the Founder Institute. So it's really the core. In Berlin, we will never make that. It's not possible because there's too much going on. We couldn't even cover that. It's not feasible, actually. What do directors get then? They get quite a lot of support from the HQ. So all the structure, so the whole curriculum. So basically, they still have to put in the founders and put in the mentors, but the whole structure, how the startups work, so what they have to do, and where they put it, is all in a database, is in a platform, so you can all reuse it, all that. So all that doesn't have to be done by themselves. FI founders, so the people who actually take part, what kind of founders are they? So they don't have to be from a business university. It's not a requirement in the beginning. We have founders from all ages. We have people who are 20 to 22, and we have people who are 55, 60. There's all a really big range. It's like the focus is somewhere between 30 and 35, so that's like the largest. It's a majority, and it's also the average. But it can be from all demographics, also from all nationalities. We have, we had Cypriots obviously last time. We had people from Lithuania, from UK, from Hungary. They all came into Berlin to take part. Which for the environment, of course, is not as good. It would be better if you actually had a chapter here, so all the Cypriots could do it here. So they have a lot of experience in their business, in their current businesses. I talked about this a little bit earlier already. So everybody who helps gets a piece of the companies which actually exist. So even if even the founders themselves, so the ones who take part and finish, it's important to finish, because we also kick some out in between who are not as diligent and structured as Parametricos, for example. For the ones who finish, they all have a little piece of all the others who finish. So if there's one company who is a Facebook or a Airbnb and gets an IPO or a big exit, all the others also get a little, then not so little part of this pie. So if actually somebody's interested to do that, I'm open to speak, and HQ is also open to discuss what's needed in a little bit more detail. So this is my pitch for you opening such a chapter. Obviously, there's a lot of architecture where it doesn't fully apply, but maybe you know somebody. I mean, everybody here knows a lot of people, and maybe you know some people where that might make sense. They don't have to be full-time. Can be part-time. I mean, usually it is part-time, so it can be aside from their normal job. But it really can make a difference to build this core of this ecosystem, or even to tie in the parts which are already existing. I mean, there is parts. There's starting VCs that are doing things. There's the government which is doing things. There is things happening in Cyprus as well, but there's still things which could tie it together better and make it make a good foundation. Thank you.